Hello, and welcome to Co-Ed for Kids Goes Live. My name is Kelly Godell, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Prevention Services at Co-Ed, Early Care and Education Division. Co-Ed is a child care and resource agency serving 31 counties in eastern Ohio. This broadcast is brought to you today in partnership with the Ohio Children's Trust Fund and the Eastern Ohio Prevention Council, both who seek to provide child abuse and neglect prevention services in Belmont, Carroll, Coshocton, Guernsey, Harrison, Jefferson, Monroe, Muskingum, Noble, and Tuscarawas counties. Thank you for joining us today, and we are live and on site at Coleman Professional Services in Steubenville. And today, my guest is Ann Brandt from Coleman Professional Services here in Steubenville. And welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Coleman Professional Services, and then as we go into our conversation, we'll talk a little bit about resiliency in young children and what that means and what it looks like in our day-to-day lives.
Sure. I'm a professional clinical counselor supervisor in the state of Ohio. I've been in the mental health field for over 25 years. Primarily, I work with children and parents throughout my entire career, both in mental health and drug and alcohol services. I've done treatment from prevention all the way to residential care. So I have a wide scope and range of different types of interventions and treatments with children and families that are having difficult times in their lives. At this point in my career right now, I am something called an early intervention child mental health specialist, which is a new type of intervention specialist that the state of Ohio has created to prevent further and ongoing expulsions of children ages 3 to 4, preschool level children, from being expelled from preschool in the state of Ohio because the numbers are so alarmingly high. So as part of what I do here at Coleman, as well as being a counselor and a supervisor, is that I'm the early childhood intervention mental health specialist. And what I do is I go into schools and I work with very, very young children who maybe have behavior problems or special need problems. And how I help them is I help the teachers and the parents and the administrators to find different types of strategies and interventions to make those children's preschool experiences as positive as they possibly can. So that's kind of the new program that I'm dealing with right now in Jefferson County. Coleman Professional Services in Jefferson County has a wide variety of services, and that's the exciting piece, is that I can work also to network through my agency if I have children that have other special needs. We have both child and adult counseling services, child and adult case management services, we have child and adult psychiatric services, and we have another wide variety of adult services as well. We have vocational service, we have housing, so we have a wide variety of different types of services that we have here in Jefferson County for our community.
And make sure I remind you to share that contact information as to how, if someone was interested or in learning more about or needed to access services here at Coleman. I do want to make sure that we bring that back to the forefront, because you're mentioning a lot of services that a lot of people may or may not know exist.
Correct.
And what the eligibility is for them, and I'm sure that there's a basic number that they can call to get information. Mm-hmm. Going back to your current position, we're talking about early childhood mental health.
Correct.
And could you refresh for us again your specific job, but what ages is that program specifically for?
At this point, we're targeting 3 and 4-year-olds, the preschool level population. Mm-hmm. And it's looking at those children that, again, are struggling in being in a basic school setting. Preschool is their first educational experience, so we want them to have a positive mm-hmm. experience, and we want them to begin to start, really enjoying what it's like to be separated from the home and starting their educational process.
And building that foundation, so not only educationally, but just the skills that are going to carry them through the rest of their educational career. Correct. And the rest of their lives. Correct. So it's a very important time, and that's something, especially here at Co-Ed, that we truly just believe so strongly in that early education and how vital it is. So knowing that there's added support for children in that is just fantastic.
Right.
And so I enjoy learning a lot more about your program as we go through too.
Great.
Today, we wanted to talk about resiliency in young children, and I think that we need to start perhaps at the very beginning of defining what is resiliency and why is it important. So if we could start there,
Sure,
that would
absolutely.
be great. And then we'll get into
Absolutely.
examples and all different kinds of things, but I think that is what so often you hear the word and you know, well, everybody's spouting about resiliency. What does that really mean? So if we can talk about that today, I think it would be really helpful for all of our viewers just to have, let's just start at the very beginning.
Sure. I think the best way to start off with this would be is when I was offered the position of the early intervention mental health specialist. One of the trainings that we went to was to identify different types of maladaptive behaviors in the classroom. And one of the things that we looked at were one of the tools that we used to kind of identify children, but the interesting piece about it was is that not only did it identify behaviors that were negative or that would cause a deficit in learning, but what we also found, what was very exciting and new for me, was is that it identified the children's strengths. It identified those types of behaviors or attributes that made them successful, even though at times their other behaviors overshadowed them. And those are those resilience pieces. And that was one of the great pieces about working as an early intervention mental health specialist, was is that we were able to take those successes or those attributes that help children to move through the world and get their needs met, beyond sort of some of the things that they were going through. Because again, unfortunately, a lot of our little people nowadays are not just dealing with having a difficult time in classrooms. Sometimes their families have issues, their environments have issues, they have socioeconomic issues. So we looked at these little people in terms of, so how do these little people get up every morning and they do what they do and they're able to still smile when they come into class, or they're still able to have some type of a relationship, whether it's with an adult or a child. And how amazing is that when, you know, mom or dad lives in poverty, they're from a single family dwelling, they don't have a lot of food, or they have chronic illness, or we may even have different types of mental illness or developmental delays. So how do these wonderful children, with all of this adversity, are able to, like I said, get up, be able to go to school, and even though they may have some hiccups along the way, is that they're still every day able to smile, they're still every day able to engage in some activities, they're able to have relationships with people.
I think going back to one of the words you used was maladaptive. These aren't bad kids. These aren't, you know, just children who cannot learn. What these are young children who have maladaptive. They just haven't learned the right coping skills, or we haven't been able to help them identify what helps them get through. And then you're also saying that we're taking a very positive approach to, well, this might not be the best scenario for you here, but wow, do you succeed when you're in this situation? And building and knowing of that. So I really think that's important too, is that we're talking about these little people. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because they're little people who haven't learned the right skills yet. And resiliency becomes one of those types of skills that we can embrace and enrich with that. So.
And the nice part is that they understand rules, they understand routines, they have great regulation, great initiative, they're verbal, they can communicate, they have relationships, and they fit all very well into a very standard curriculum. And then you have the out-of-the-box kids
and that's a great name. That's a great name.
Pretty much, is that they're out-of-the-box kids, is that these kids do it differently, but can still get to the same conclusion. Mm-hmm. They just have to journey it a different way, because the different way is the way that they work, and that's how they've been able. Yes, and that's how they've been able to, maintain and survive and do what they need to do in order to be in their world. So
it sounds like a very individualized approach.
Yes.
It's not even just using the term out of the box. I mean, this isn't a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter type of support being offered to these little people.
Correct.
So when we go back and we talk about a little bit about resiliency and how we build that, we had talked about, being loved unconditionally. Like that's one of the cool things that from our pre-talk that we were really identifying that.
Correct.
And so, and you've said that a little bit already so far, seeing this little person for who he is, where they succeed, and where they need some more help. So that's showing love, and it doesn't make you a bad kid. It makes you might need a little bit more support over there. So I think that's a great place to start. And then you have these other strategies about how we can get these kids. They don't ever need to be in the box, but how can they be successful in that environment and all of these early learning experiences that they're having, so that they look forward to kindergarten, so that they look forward to elementary school and middle school, and hopefully building that good foundation. So what are some other techniques and strategies?
Well, one of the things that we look at first with little people is that we look at where are their strengths and where are the things that they need work with. And for this age group specifically, what we're looking at is 2 to 3, 3 to 4, kind of 4 to 5, moving in those types of age levels. What we look at are 3 basic overall general development milestones, okay, in terms of social emotional development. So we look at things like initiative. Can a child get their needs met? And that need can be a wide variety of things, from basic needs like can a child feed themselves, give themselves water, take care of themselves in a very basic way, to having relationships with people and to wanting to have fun. Can they reach out if they need help? Those types of things. That's what we consider like an initiative. The second thing that we look at is self-regulation, which everybody's very well aware of, because that's the time when we can't sit still, we're always wiggling, we're always doing things, I have difficulty self-regulating sometimes.
I was going to make
and
the point.
I'm an old woman. So.
That is not a child-only behavior.
No.
Those are all the things that we even as adults look at. Self-regulation is a challenge.
Absolutely, it is, and that's one of the things that we look at is that how well can this child regulate themselves? How aware are they of their regulation? We always talk about it as where are their bodies in space. And do they know where their bodies are in space? Because some little people, that takes a little bit of time to develop. And then the third thing we look at is relationships. Are these children are they not able to, or are they able to have relationships not only with the primary parental group, whoever that is, but can they have relationships with teachers and aides and administrators? Can they have relationships with children their age? Can they have relationships with older children? It's looking at how do they bond with people, how do they limit themselves, how do they trust. So it's those types of skills. So when we look at just those 3 basic developmental areas, that's what we look at when we observe a child and look at their resiliency. I have some kids that are some of the best initiatives. They're the best initiators. When they see something, they're going after it. But they have low self-regulation because when they see it, they go for it. It doesn't matter if you're teaching an art lesson. They're going for the bathroom. So they're getting their needs met. So we have to teach that, that's really great that you're able to be able to initiate. You know what you need and you're going to go after it. We need to teach then a different way of communicating, regulating. So what do we do when we have to go to the bathroom? We really have to go, and we know we have to go. We raise our hand and we teach that behavior rather than just getting up and going. So, and believe it or not, I do have some children that they don't have initiative. They'll sit very quietly and wait for somebody to come and get them. They don't have independency skills. The world is either too frightening or they feel too overwhelmed, and it feels like a great big
almost
wave.
Overly self-regulated.
Absolutely.
So the pendulum swings.
Absolutely. So it's those kids, but those sometimes are kids that have really good relationships with grown-ups. So we want them to feel close to grown-ups, and then the grown-ups are going to be able to teach them those types of behaviors. That, if you want something, you ask for it. Or if you want something, you go
And I saw that was one of our strategies too, is role modeling that behavior.
Correct.
So not only modeling by their peers, that this is what the classroom, this is what I see the rest of the classroom behaving or taking their initiative, but also I'm seeing positive adults who are showing me on a regular and consistent basis that this is the way to get my needs met. So that sounds like extremely difficult sometimes and probably challenging with the population.
Right, absolutely.
And that we're talking about these specific kiddos and some of the challenging behaviors that they may have.
One of the difficult things I think for us as grown-ups also, especially when we're talking about kids that have a lack of initiative, or we want to support more independent behavior, is that because they're so little and because they're learning things, is that we all want to jump in and help, because again, they're our child, they're our student, we care about them deeply, and we want to be able to, that primary need of protection is always there within us. So, but what we look at for resiliency pieces are things like, if I have a child who, has just learned that if he keeps quiet, the grown-ups will do it for me. And so we develop almost a mutism in classroom, because he won't speak, he won't participate, but grown-ups will anticipate his needs for him. And so one of the difficult things we go in and do is say to them, don't do that. Wait him out. Wait. If you have to wait 15 minutes for him to put his coat in his cubby and zip up his book bag and join the carpet, we'll wait 15 minutes and we'll prompt him. We'll let him know we're there, and we'll let him know that if he needs help, he needs to ask for help, but we're not going to do it for him. We want to promote that. We want him to know that we are there socially for him and that he can trust us, but we also need to let him know that he has to begin to start doing these types of things to keep that process moving, because when he hits kindergarten or when he hits first grade, expectations will change, and nobody's going to do that for him. So again, it's also looking at our behaviors in the sense of that we have to let them sometimes face fears. We have to sometimes let them make mistakes. And
that's hard, whether it be as a parent, whether that be as an instructor or a teacher in the classroom,
Correct.
Or as the mental health professional there to help guide them through this process. So I think all of us working in the field of early care and education have come across those situations, and then also I probably have lots of examples as to how that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, is just letting him go and be who he needs to be at that time.
Because we're always dependent on schedules. We have routines, we have schedules, and I'll tell folks, I know you've got to get this done. I know you're on a time limit, but you know what? That child knows that too. So this is a bright kid that knows that you're in a hurry, and if I just keep being quiet, you're going to do it for me. So again, that shows to me this is a kid who can really strategize to get his needs met. That's resiliency, even though it doesn't feel like resiliency to us. Because because we've got to get down to we have to get down to the gym, but this kid knows that if I wait you out,
learning behavior.
Again, that's what I mean by that's that really great resiliency piece, is that this child can strategize that if I engage in this type of behavior long enough, you eventually will do it for me. That's a pretty neat kid.
And I think we would come back to the words we use, consistency, and as a parent, you're working with teachers and aides and what have you. It's that consistency. So are you working with families the same techniques and the same strategies that you're using with the instructors?
Absolutely.
And in your position and what you're doing right now, is there a lot of work that you're doing with families, or is it primarily in the school setting?
Right now we're doing mostly in the school setting, but however, it's very easy to generalize this, and I do this through my practice and when I'm counseling, when I have children that come in for me for individual mental health services, is that we work on that parenting piece as well. And this is all part of that parenting piece. It's looking at, do you really understand how your child ticks? Do you understand what part of out of the box means? Is that a kid that will wait you out and wait you out and wait you out is not going to be a kid in the box, but if you work with the strategies that they do well and just turn them to your advantage, things can work out a lot better.
And that's probably where it becomes a very great and valuable partnership between the staff at the school,
correct,
and then also what happens at home, so that there's some communication going there.
And there's continuity of what you're doing, because we need to continue to do that. Because again, we want to make sure that those behaviors blossom, so that they have another tool in their toolbox. It's not just about problem solving; it's about giving them the opportunities to see that they can also trust other adults, that they're able to go beyond what is comfortable for them. Again, we want to build more resiliencies that way.
I think when we're talking about resiliency and it's a lot of observation. It sounds as though, as one we've mentioned, knowing how your child ticks. What kind of box are they, outside of, and knowing about that different structure that they'll respond to, talking about that type of structure. And so I think about, the varying just types of classrooms that exist across, our 10 counties, across, any county really. Is every school situation has its own culture and environment, and what works and what doesn't work, or what. Every family is different. And so it's really taking that look at, okay, here's what I know works for my child. Here's what I've noticed that works best whenever we're in this classroom and this is happening. And pulling all that information together to kind of share,
Right.
Yeah, so we know that this works. Let's keep doing this.
And it's also being a support and advocate for parents and teachers and administrators, because also the issue is that we want these behaviors to change yesterday. I mean, especially when they are dangerous behaviors like biting or kicking or hitting, and these self-abusive behaviors like hair pulling. Those types of things, we need them to stop and stop quickly. And sometimes strategies take a while to do. Sometimes we have to really understand and take our time with things. So it's nice to have somebody to say to you, I'm glad it worked this week, and you're right, probably next week they're going to forget it, we have to reteach it again, but we're going to do that, and I'm going to help you do that. And that's kind of part of my job as being an intervention specialist, is that I go into the teachers and they'll say, yeah, that worked for 2 days, and then it didn't. And I'll say, let's talk about why that happened.
Because what changed within... What happened on day 3?
Right, exactly.
What exactly happened on day 3?
Let's talk about why that happened. Let's talk about what this really, really bright kid who maybe can't say their ABCs or 1, 2, 3s, but this really, really bright kid figured you out fast. And to me, that's a really bright kid. So how do we change
that's
it
a very
up?
resilient child.
Yes, that's a very
who's able to look at the environment that they're in and adapt their behavior to get their needs met.
It's an out-of-the-box kid, because what they figured out was that, okay, if we do this, this, and this, that happens. But what happens if I change the formula? What happens if I stop, or if I go and do this? Then what do I get? I mean, to me, that is a really, really super bright kid who's figuring out how to manipulate their environment to get their needs met. And that's what resilience, part of resiliency is all about, is that how do I get my needs met the best way I know how? So when we teach those
And it may not be what others perceive as the most positive way.
Exactly.
But it's working.
So again, it's looking at, it's all about how you perceive intelligence, and it's about when you start to look at that these are bright kids. They're not and you don't take it personally, and it's not that emotional attack that you feel from kids that become defiant or just don't get it, or they're just not there, or they need to grow up. Okay, we'll have to. Sometimes I get teachers, and I understand their frustration. They get so frustrated, and I get parents that are so frustrated, and I go, "They're 3." Sometimes we forget that piece because we have pressures on us, and we have agendas that we have other people telling us we need to get. So sometimes we need to take a step back and go, "They're 3." Don't get frustrated if you can't climb 2 flights of stairs, okay? Because the shoes are 2 sizes too big, but there's a reason why. We have to look at those things.
It does draw into that whole child development piece of infant and toddler behaviors and what's expected, or what can really be reasonable expectations at that point. And then going into those toddlers and these preschool ages, and just remember that child development wise, not everybody's exactly the same. So being aware of that, and that's another great, I think, learning resource for a lot of our child care providers is remembering that they know child development, but sometimes we need to be reminded that they're 3. Because parents, sometimes we forget.
Because we have pressures on us. We have pressures on, we have to get things done, and this needs to be done because of whatever outside force is influencing us. So we feel the stress. So when we feel the stress, sometimes we forget our own resiliencies. And then we sort of begin to start to go backwards in terms of imploding.
And at that point where stress is building on stress.
Absolutely. So when you're stressed, they're stressed. And then they engage in more resilient types of behaviors, whether they're positive or negative, in order for them to get their needs met.
We've covered a lot of information today. And we could probably talk for hours and hours about this. But I think that today was a really great introduction to, if anything, mental health within this young population, and how we as professionals and as childcare providers and teachers and parents, there's just a lot to always be aware of, and to really understand when we're looking at our kids, and before we start labeling them as bad kids, but it's maladaptive, and really being able to look and see what are the resiliency skills, and what can we do to reinforce the positive, and kind of maybe
reshape.
And I like that, reshape the negative behaviors, because it's been meeting their needs.
Correct.
So I think if we can all take that away today, I think that's a really great introduction into this whole topic about resiliency and what we can do. So in recapping, I think what I'd like us to talk is, one, if you reside in Jefferson County or here in the Steubenville area, Coleman Professionals is here and available to help provide these types of services, all types of mental health services. And so could you please share the contact information for that?
The contact information is 740-996-7100. And the main office is at 3200 Johnson Road, and that's in Steubenville. We're right next door to the hospital.
And then the other, if you're not in this surrounding area, there are other mental health providers who are providing this type of services for young kids. And so we would ask you to contact your county specifically to see what's available, or what providers are perhaps available in your area and communities. As always, following our Facebook Live today, will be available for questions and to take any comments that you may have about our broadcast today. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we will help direct you in the right direction to services that Anna and I talked about today. And I would invite you back for our next broadcast, when, again, my guest will be Ann, and we'll be talking about building supports for parents and what we can do in our communities to help them learn some of the strategies that we're using to build resiliency in children, and then also how to help them perhaps caretake their own resiliency, and talk about that a little bit in our next session. So thank you very much, and have a great day.